The stars were silent witnesses to humanity's darkest hour. Admiral James Harper stood on the bridge of the HSS Vindicator, the last surviving warship of Earth's once mighty fleet. Through the viewport, he watched as the alien armada gathered around what remained of humanity's home planet. 3 days had passed since the Volteri Dominion had broken through Earth's orbital defenses. 3 days of fire raining from the sky. 3 days of silence from planetary command. "Status report," Harper ordered, his voice steady despite the weight pressing against his chest. Lieutenant Sarah Chen glanced up from her console, dark circles under her eyes. "Engine repairs at 87%, Admiral. Weapons systems operational but ammunition reserves critical. Life support stable." She hesitated. Still no response to our hails from any Earth installation. Harper nodded, the motion mechanical. Around him, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, each person carrying the knowledge that they might be the last humans alive in the galaxy. The Vindicator had survived the initial assault only because it had been on the far side of Mars when the Volteri struck. When the defensive grid fell, Harper had made the call to retreat beyond the system's edge to effect repairs, a decision that haunted him with each passing hour. "Sir," called Commander Rice from Tactical, "long-range sensors are picking up Volteri communications." "They're celebrating." Harper's jaw tightened. The Volteri Dominion had emerged from deep space 18 months ago, their message simple and brutal. Submit or perish. Humanity, having only recently achieved faster-than-light travel, had chosen to stand their ground. They had believed their determination would outweigh their technological disadvantage. They had been wrong. "They think it's over," Harper said softly. "They think they've won." "Haven't they?" whispered Ensign Davis, the young officer immediately flushing with shame at having spoken aloud. Harper turned to face his crew. These men and women had followed him into hell, had watched their world burn, had lost everyone they'd ever loved. They deserved honesty. "In 22 years of service," Harper began, "I've learned one truth about humanity. We don't know when to quit." He straightened his shoulders. "The Volteri believe they've erased us from the galaxy. They're wrong. We are still here. And as long as humans draw breath, Earth is not dead." He strode to the navigation station. "What's the status of the FTL drive?" Lieutenant Chen answered. "Functional, sir, but the radiation shielding is compromised. Extended travel would be hazardous." "How hazardous?" "Potentially fatal after approximately 12 jumps." Harper considered this. "And the Crucible project?" The bridge fell silent. The Crucible had been humanity's last-ditch weapon development program. Experimental technology based on salvaged alien tech. Most of it hadn't been ready for deployment when the attack came. Most, but not all. "The prototype is secured in Cargo Bay 3, Commander Rice confirmed. Dr. Patel says it's operational, but untested." "Then will be the test," Harper decided. He turned back to the viewport, studying the distant stars. Among them lay the Volteri homeworlds, and beyond those, the crown jewel of their empire, Nexus Primus, a massive space station that served as the administrative center of the Dominion. If Earth had fallen, the Vindicator no longer had a home to defend. But it did have a way to make the Volteri regret their victory. "Plot a course to the Epsilon sector," Harper ordered. "We're going hunting." The journey took weeks. The Vindicator slipped through space like a ghost, avoiding Volteri patrols and supply lines. With each FTL jump, the radiation warnings grew more insistent. Crew members began showing signs of exposure. Nosebleeds, fatigue, worse. Harper offered to release anyone from duty who wished to stay behind on one of the habitable moons they passed. No one accepted. On the eve of what might be their final jump, Harper found Dr. Alina Patil in the cargo bay, making adjustments to the Crucible device, a sleek silver cylinder that seemed to absorb the light around it. "Will it work?" Harper asked without preamble. Patil didn't look up from her work. "Theoretically, yes. The crucible creates a cascading energy field that should disrupt the molecular bonds in any structure it touches. Practically. She finally met his gaze. I don't know. We never got to the testing phase. And the range. Once deployed, it should affect everything within a 5-kilometer radius. Anything beyond that should be safe. She hesitated. Admiral, there's something else you should know. The deployment has to be manual. Someone needs to be there to activate the final sequence. Harper absorbed this. A suicide mission. Yes, Patil admitted. I volunteered. No, Harper shook his head. I'll do it. With respect, sir, you're needed to command the ship. I'm the one who understands how the crucible works. Their argument was interrupted by an alarm. Lieutenant Chen's voice came over the intercom. Admiral to the bridge, immediately. When Harper arrived, the tactical display showed a Volturi patrol closing in. 3 warships that had detected the Vindicator's energy signature. Time to intercept, Harper demanded. 8 minutes, sir, Rise reported. They're hailing their reinforcements. Harper made his decision instantly. Jump now. Get us to Nexus Primus. Sir, the drive needs 10 minutes tow. We don't have 10 minutes. Override the safeties and jump now. The FTL drive screamed in protest as it engaged, the ship shuddering around them. A conduit exploded on the port side of the bridge, and warning lights flashed across every console. Then came the familiar stretching sensation of faster-than-light travel, more violent than usual, like being pulled through the eye of a needle. When they emerged, the Vindicator was bleeding atmosphere from multiple hull breaches. Emergency force fields snapped into place, and damage control teams rushed to make repairs. But Harper's attention was fixed on the view ahead. Nexus Primus hung in space like an artificial star, a massive wheel-shaped structure surrounded by dozens of Volturi warships. It was several times larger than any space station humanity had ever constructed, housing millions of the Dominion's elite. And it was completely unprepared for what had just arrived on its doorstep. They've spotted us, Chen reported, her voice tight with tension. Receiving multiple hails. Their defensive grid is powering up. Harper watched as the Volturi ships began to move, forming a protective screen around their precious station. They were confused. No human vessel had ever penetrated this deep into their territory. They didn't yet understand what the Vindicator represented. Humanity's last, defiant stand. Broadcast on all frequencies, Harper ordered. Let them hear us. Chen nodded, opening the channel. Harper drew himself up. This is Admiral James Harper of the human spaceship Vindicator. You believed you destroyed us. You celebrated our extinction. But here we stand at the heart of your empire. His voice grew harder. You took our world from us. Now we've come to take something from you. He cut the transmission with a sharp gesture. Battle stations. Prepare the crucible for deployment. As the crew rushed to comply, Harper's gaze remained fixed on the massive station ahead. The Volturi had thought the war was over. They were about to learn otherwise. Earth might be gone, but humanity's vengeance had only just begun. The bridge fell silent as the Volturi ships formed a defensive perimeter. Harper could almost feel their confusion radiating across the void. Humans weren't supposed to be here. Humans weren't supposed to exist anymore. They're scanning us, Lieutenant Chen reported, her fingers dancing across her console. Heavy energy signatures from their weapon systems. They're preparing to fire. Harper nodded. He'd expected nothing less. Tactical analysis. Commander Rise looked up from his station, his face grim in the red emergency lighting. 23 warships. Admiral. Mixed classes, but at least 5 heavy destroyers. Plus the station's defense grid. He didn't need to state the obvious. The Vindicator couldn't win this fight through conventional means. Time until they're in firing range. 3 minutes, sir. Harper turned to Dr. Patel, who had joined them on the bridge. Is the crucible ready? Yes, she replied, dark eyes steady despite the chaos around them. But we need to get closer, much closer. The deployment range is limited. Harper studied the tactical display. The Volteri were spreading out, trying to surround them. Standard procedure when dealing with a single enemy vessel. They still hadn't realized what the Vindicator truly was. Not a warship, but a delivery system. Navigation, Harper ordered. Plot a course straight through their line, maximum thrust. Aim for the station's central hub. Sir. Lieutenant Chen looked up, shocked. That's a suicide run. Their crossfire will tear us apart before we're halfway there. Not if we give them something else to worry about. Harper turned to weapons control. Target our remaining missiles on their flanking vessels. Wide dispersal pattern. Then prepare all railguns for continuous fire. As the crew carried out his orders, Harper accessed his personal terminal. His fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before he entered his command codes and began recording. This is Admiral James Harper of the HSS Vindicator. If you're receiving this, then our mission was successful, and this message is being broadcast by the ship's automated systems. He paused, considering his words carefully. The Volteri Dominion believes they've exterminated humanity. They are wrong. Even now, human colonies exist beyond their knowledge, hidden throughout the Orion Spur. It was a lie, of course. As far as Harper knew, Earth had been, humanity's only home. But the Volteri didn't know that. And fear of the unknown was a powerful weapon. We may have lost Earth, but humanity survives, and we will never forget. We will never forgive. The attack on Nexus Primus is just the beginning. He ended the recording and set it to broadcast on all frequencies when the Vindicator was destroyed. Missiles armed, reported Weapons Officer Taylor, interrupting Harper's thoughts. Railguns charged and ready. Shields at maximum, added Commander Reyes. Though they won't hold for long against that kind of firepower. Harper returned to the captain's chair, strapping himself in. Around him, the bridge crew did the same, their movements precise despite the fear in their eyes. They had all known this was a one-way mission, but facing the reality of it was something else entirely. Dr. Patel, Harper said, you should get to the deployment bay. I'll need you to oversee final preparations. Patel nodded. About what we discussed earlier, Admiral. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Harper cut her off. For now, just make sure the crucible is ready. As Patel left the bridge, Harper activated the ship-wide comm. All hands, this is the Admiral. In 2 minutes, we will engage the enemy. Our mission is simple. Deliver the crucible device to Nexus Primus and activate it. The Volteri took everything from us. Today, we take something back. He paused. I won't lie to you. The odds are against us. But I've never been prouder to serve with any crew. Whatever happens next, remember, as long as a single human survives, Earth is not dead. Harper out. He closed the channel and looked around at his bridge officers. They were watching him, waiting. These weren't just soldiers following orders. They were the last guardians of a fallen world, carrying the memory of billions. 1 minute to contact, Chen announced. Her voice was steady now, the fear replaced by determination. Harper nodded. Launch missiles. The Vindicator shuddered as its remaining missiles streaked toward the Volteri formation. Almost immediately, the alien vessels began evasive maneuvers, energy weapons lashing out to intercept the incoming threats. Full power to engines, Harper commanded. Take us in. The human warship surged forward, aimed like a spear at the heart of the Volteri line. On the tactical display, the enemy formation wavered as commanders tried to decide whether to focus on the missiles or the charging vessel. They're targeting us, Reyes warned. Multiple weapon locks. Evasive pattern Delta, Harper ordered. Railguns, fire at will. The Vindicator's main weapons roared to life, magnetic accelerators hurling depleted uranium slugs at a significant fraction of light speed. The projectiles slammed into the lead Volteri ship, punching through its shields and tearing into its hull. But the aliens responded with overwhelming force. Energy beams and plasma bolts converged on the human vessel from all directions. The Vindicator's shields flared brilliant blue as they absorbed the initial barrage. "Shields at 60%, Chen reported, voice raised over the sound of straining systems. 52, 45. A violent impact rocked the ship. A console exploded on the port side of the bridge, sending an ensign tumbling to the deck. Medical staff rushed to assist. "Hull breach on decks 3 and 4, Rice called out. "Emergency force fields holding. We've lost the port missile batteries." Harper gripped the arms of his chair as another hit shook the Vindicator. "Distance to target, 8,000 kilometers in closing," Chen answered. "We need to get within 5,000 for optimal deployment." The view screen showed chaos as the Vindicator plunged through the scattered Valtteri formation. 2 alien ships had collided in their haste to intercept, and a third was venting atmosphere from multiple breaches. But more were turning to engage, their weapons charging. "Incoming transmission," Chen announced suddenly. It's from the station." Harper raised an eyebrow. "Put it through." The main screen shifted to show a Valtteri, tall, with iridescent scales, and 4 pupilless eyes arranged in a diamond pattern. Unlike most of its kind, this one wore elaborate ceremonial armor rather than a military uniform. "Human vessel," the alien spoke, its translator rendering its clicks and whistles into flat, emotionless English. "I am High Commander Vexera of the Dominion. Your attack is futile. Surrender now, and your deaths will be swift." Harper studied the alien commander, noting the insignia on its armor. This wasn't just any Valtteri. This was one of their highest-ranking officials. "High Commander," Harper replied, his voice cold. "You destroyed our world. Did you truly believe we would not come for yours?" The Valtteri's outer eyes narrowed. "Your species was deemed too dangerous to incorporate into the Dominion. Your tendency toward violence and your rapid technological advancement made extinction the logical choice." A bitter laugh escaped Harper's lips. "And yet here we are, at the heart of your empire." Another hit rocked the ship, but he didn't flinch. "You should have made sure we were dead." He cut the transmission with a gesture. "Distance, 6,000 kilometers, Chen answered. 5 Valtteri warships moving to intercept. Divert all remaining power to engines and forward shields," Harper ordered. "We need to punch through their line." The ship lurched forward, its damaged engines straining. Harper's console flashed with a priority message from Dr. Patel in the deployment bay. He opened the channel. "Admiral." Patel's voice came through, strained but determined. "The Crucible is showing signs of instability. The damage to the ship has affected its containment field. If we don't deploy soon." Harper understood the implication. "We're almost in range, Doctor. Stand by." He closed the channel and turned to tactical. Status of the Valtteri interceptors. Rise didn't look up from his console. 3 minutes until they cut us off. "We won't make it, sir. Not unless we give them a target they can't ignore," Harper finished. He made his decision. "Prepare to separate the ship." The bridge crew stared at Harper in stunned silence. Ship separation was a desperate measure, something they had trained for, but never expected to implement. "Sir," Commander Rice finally spoke, "separation protocols weren't designed for combat conditions." "I'm aware of that, Commander." Harper's eyes remained fixed on the tactical display, watching as the Valtteri warships adjusted their formation to cut off the Vindicator's approach. "But the forward section can still reach the station while the engineering section draws their fire." Lieutenant Chen shook her head. "The forward section won't have enough power to maintain shields. It would be completely vulnerable." "It doesn't need shields," Harper replied. "It just needs to get close enough." He opened a ship-wide channel. "All hands, this is the Admiral. Prepare for emergency separation. Engineering crews to the aft section. Deployment team to the forward section. All other personnel, report to your designated evacuation stations. We separate in 2 minutes." As the crew scrambled to comply, Harper turned to Dr. Patel on the internal comm. "Doctor, What's the minimum crew required to deploy the Crucible? Patel's face on the screen was illuminated by flashing warning lights. Just one. Admiral. Me. Negative. I need you on the engineering section to coordinate the distraction. I'll handle the deployment. Patel's eyes widened. Admiral, with all due respect, the final calibrations require. That's an order, Doctor. Upload all deployment procedures to my personal terminal immediately. Harper's tone left no room for argument. The engineering section will need your expertise more than I will. Harper closed the channel before she could protest further. He turned to his senior officers. Commander Reyes, you'll take command of the engineering section. Lieutenant Chen, you'll go with him. Sir, Chen objected. Protocol dictates that I stay with you as your second. To hell with protocol. Harper cut her off. The engineering section needs to survive long enough for the Crucible to deploy. That means you and Reyes need to be there to make it happen. Reyes stepped forward. And what about you, sir? Harper met his gaze steadily. I'll pilot the forward section to the target. Once in position, I'll deploy the Crucible manually. Understanding dawned on their faces. Harper was sending them away because the forward section, his section, wasn't coming back. Sir, let me volunteer instead. Reyes began, but Harper silenced him with a raised hand. This is my responsibility, Commander. Earth was under my protection, and I failed. His voice remained professional, but his eyes betrayed his resolve. I won't fail again. Now get to your stations. That's an order. As his officers reluctantly moved to comply, Harper downloaded the Crucible deployment protocols to his neural implant. The data streamed into his consciousness. Activation sequences, stabilization procedures, and finally, the detonation protocol. The information confirmed what he had already suspected. The deployment required someone to remain with the device until the very end. The ship shuddered as another Volturi blast struck home. Shields at 28%, reported the tactical officer who would remain on the bridge during separation. Hull breaches on decks 5 through 8. Separation preparations complete, Admiral, came the report from engineering. All essential personnel are in position. Harper nodded. Begin separation sequence. Warning klaxons blared throughout the ship as massive locking mechanisms disengage. With a groan of protesting metal, the Vindicator began to split into two distinct sections. The forward section, containing the bridge and the Crucible, and the larger engineering section, housing the main engines and most of the weapons. Separation complete, reported the tactical officer. Engineering section is away. On the view screen, Harper watched as the rear portion of his ship veered off on a new heading, immediately launching its remaining missiles toward the Volturi fleet. The alien ships responded predictably, most of them breaking off to pursue the more heavily armed engineering section. They took the bait, Harper murmured. He turned to the skeleton crew remaining on the bridge. All of you, get to the escape pods now. The junior officers exchanged glances. Sir, we can't leave you alone. That's exactly what you're going to do, Harper insisted. The forward section's heading straight for that station. There's no reason for anyone else to go down with it. When they still hesitated, he softened his tone. The engineering section will need every hand they can get. Those pods will rendezvous with Commander Reyes. That's where you're needed now. Reluctantly, they complied, leaving Harper alone on the bridge of what was essentially now a massive projectile hurtling toward Nexus Primus. He transferred all controls to his command chair and sealed the bridge. 4,000 kilometers to target, the computer announced dispassionately. 3 minutes to optimal deployment range. Harper opened a channel to the engineering section. On the screen, he could see Reyes and Chen coordinating a chaotic defense as the Volturi ships hammered them with energy weapons. Status report, Commander. Reyes looked up, his face streaked with sweat and soot. We've got their attention. Sir, 17 warships on our tail, shield holding at 31%. And the escape pods. All received. We're doing everything we can to keep the Volturi focused on us. A violent impact shook Reyes's image. "But we can't keep this up much longer." "You don't have to," Harper assured him. "Just long enough." He hesitated, then added, "It's been an honor, Commander." Reyes straightened, offering a crisp salute that Chen and the visible bridge crew quickly mirrored. "The honor has been ours, Admiral." Harper returned the salute, then closed the channel. Alone now, he piloted the forward section through the gap in the Volteri defenses. Only 6 enemy ships remained between him and the station, and they were scrambling to reposition. 3,000 kilometers to target, the computer announced. On his tactical display, Harper could see the engineering section executing a series of brilliant evasive maneuvers, drawing the majority of the Volteri fleet farther away from the station. Reyes was buying him the time he needed. A proximity alert blared as 2 Volteri destroyers moved to intercept the forward section. Without the main engines, Harper's maneuverability was limited, but he still had the maneuvering thrusters. He executed a rolling dive, narrowly avoiding the first barrage of energy weapons. The second blast caught the forward section's port side, tearing away a chunk of the hull. Warning lights flashed across Harper's console as atmosphere vented into space from multiple decks. He rerouted emergency power to the remaining thrusters and pressed onward. 2,000 kilometers to target. The station loomed larger on the view screen, its massive wheel-like structure now clearly visible. Harper could make out the individual sectors: diplomatic quarters, military command, administrative centers, the beating heart of the Volteri Dominion. Another blast rocked the forward section, knocking out the starboard thrusters. The ship began to tumble, throwing Harper against his restraints. He fought with the controls, using the remaining thrusters to stabilize the vessel, but the damage was severe. "Warning: hull integrity critical. Structural failure imminent," the computer announced. Harper ignored the warnings. "Computer, status of Cargo Bay 3. Cargo Bay 3 intact. Crucible device stable. 1,000 kilometers to target. Optimal deployment range achieved." With shaking hands, Harper activated the final sequence, transferring control of the forward section to the autopilot. He unstrapped from his chair and made his way through the buckling corridors toward Cargo Bay 3. Emergency force fields flickered as he passed, barely containing the vacuum of space beyond the damaged hull. Twice he had to climb through sections where artificial gravity had failed, pulling himself along by handholds as the ship continued its approach to Nexus Primus. When he reached Cargo Bay 3, the massive doors slid open to reveal the Crucible, a sleek, cylindrical device pulsing with an ethereal blue light. Harper approached it, feeling a strange calm descend over him despite the chaos around him. "Computer, time to impact with Nexus Primus." Impact in 90 seconds. Harper placed his hand on the Crucible's activation panel, his neural implant interfacing with the device. The deployment sequences Dr. Patel had uploaded began to flow through his mind. As he initiated the final preparations, a transmission alert sounded. "Admiral Harper." The voice of High Commander Vexra filled the cargo bay. "Your ship is crippled. Your fleet is destroyed. Your world is gone. And still you persist. Why?" Harper continued the activation sequence as he replied. "Because that's what humans do, Commander. We persist. Such determination is admirable, but futile," Vexra responded. "Even now, our weapons are locked on your vessel. You will not reach the station." Harper smiled grimly as the Crucible's core began to pulse more rapidly. "I don't need to reach it. I just need to get close enough." The transmission cut off as another impact rocked the forward section. Harper was thrown against the Crucible, but he maintained his connection to the device. The final sequence was nearly complete. 30 seconds to impact," announced the computer. Through the cargo bay viewport, Harper could see Nexus Primus filling his vision, its massive structure growing larger with each passing moment. The Volteri ships were frantically trying to intercept, but it was too late. The forward section of the HSS Vindicator, the last warship of Earth, had reached its target. Harper closed his eyes and thought of Earth, of blue skies and rolling oceans, of cities teeming with life, of everything that had been lost. His hand hovered over the final activation sequence. "For Earth," he whispered. Harper's finger hovered over the activation sequence when the cargo bay doors suddenly sealed shut behind him. The lighting shifted to a deep crimson, and an unfamiliar alarm began to sound. "Security protocol activated," announced the computer in a voice that wasn't quite right. "Access to Crucible restricted." Harper spun around, adrenaline surging through his veins. "Override, Admiral Authorization Code Harper 709 Echo." The computer remained silent for a moment, then responded, "Override rejected." A holographic projection flickered to life beside the Crucible. Not the standard ship's interface, but something else entirely. The image stabilized to reveal a figure Harper hadn't seen in over a year. Fleet Admiral Diana Voss, former head of Earth's Defense Command. "James," the hologram spoke, its voice carrying the unmistakable cadence of his former superior. "If you're viewing this message, then Earth has fallen, and you're attempting to deploy the Crucible." Harper stared in disbelief. "Admiral Voss, this is impossible. You died during the first Valtteri assault." The hologram continued as if it couldn't hear him. A pre-recorded message. "What you're about to do is exactly what I would have done in your position. But there's something you don't know about the Crucible, something I kept from everyone except a select few scientists." Harper checked the ship's trajectory. 20 seconds to impact. He needed to activate the weapon now. "Computer, emergency override. Command structure violation. Article 15. Override rejected," the computer repeated. "Priority message in progress." The hologram of Voss stepped closer. "The Crucible isn't just a weapon, James. It's based on Valtteri technology we recovered from a scout ship that crashed in the Arctic 3 years before they arrived. What we didn't understand then was that the Crucible doesn't destroy matter, it shifts it." Harper felt a chill run down his spine. "Shifts it? Shifts it where?" "The Valtteri don't just come from another part of our galaxy," Voss continued. "They come from somewhere else entirely. The technology in the Crucible creates a bridge between our reality and theirs. When they attacked Earth, they weren't trying to conquer us. They were trying to recover this technology before we could fully activate it." Harper's mind raced. 10 seconds to impact. "Computer, abort collision course." Unable to comply. "Navigation systems offline." The hologram of Voss looked directly at Harper, as if she could see him across time. The Crucible was designed with a failsafe. If it detects that it's about to be used as a weapon, it activates a different protocol. Instead of destroying the target, it creates a permanent bridge. A doorway. 5 seconds to impact. "A doorway to what?" Harper demanded, though he knew the hologram couldn't answer. As if in response, the Crucible's blue glow intensified, spreading throughout the cargo bay. The metal walls began to vibrate at a frequency that made Harper's teeth ache. The device was activating itself. Not to what James, Voss's hologram said as it began to fade. From what? The impact never came. Instead, the forward section of the Vindicator seemed to pass through the outer hull of Nexus Primus like a ghost. Harper was thrown to the deck as reality itself seemed to tear around the ship. Through the viewports, he glimpsed impossible geometries, structures that couldn't exist in three-dimensional space folding in on themselves. And then, stillness. Harper climbed to his feet, disoriented. The cargo bay appeared intact, but the Crucible had changed. Its sleek cylindrical form had expanded, creating what looked like a doorway of pulsing energy. Beyond it, Harper could see something. Not the interior of Nexus Primus, but somewhere else entirely. "Warning," the computer announced, its voice distorted. "Dimensional breach detected. Unknown entities approaching." Before Harper could respond, the ship's communication system crackled to life. "Admiral Harper, do you copy?" It was Chen's voice, tense with urgency. "The Valtteri. They're retreating. All of them. They've broken off their attack and are abandoning the station. "What did you do?" "I didn't do anything," Harper replied, his eyes fixed on the energy doorway. The crucible activated itself. "Lieutenant, listen carefully. The weapon isn't what we thought it was. It's some kind of portal technology." "The portal?" Chen's confusion was evident even through the static. "To where?" A shadow moved within the energy field of the doorway. Something was coming through. "I don't know," Harper answered, reaching for his sidearm. "But I think we're about to find out." The shadow solidified into a figure, humanoid but not human, with elongated limbs and skin that seemed to shift colors like oil on water. It stepped through the doorway and regarded Harper with eyes that contained galaxies. At last, it spoke, its voice resonating directly in Harper's mind rather than through his ears. The cycle repeats. Harper kept his weapon trained on the entity. "Who are you?" "What cycle?" "We are the precursors," the being replied. "Those you call Volteri are our creation, just as humans are. The cycle of ascension continues as it must." Harper's mind reeled. "You created both our species. Why would you set us against each other?" "Not against," the precursor corrected. "In competition. Only through conflict does evolution accelerate. Only through struggle does a species reach its potential." It gestured to the crucible. "This device was our gift, left for whichever species proved worthy of finding it." "Gift?" Harper's voice hardened. "Earth is gone. Billions dead. You call that a gift?" The precursor's expression remained impassive. "The Volteri found their own device centuries ago. It led them to ascension before they were truly ready. They have stagnated, become conquerors rather than creators. We had hoped humans might provide balance." A tremor ran through the ship, and Harper struggled to maintain his footing. Through the viewport, he could see Nexus Primus beginning to change. Parts of the station were dissolving, reforming into unfamiliar structures. "What's happening?" Harper demanded. "Convergence," the precursor answered. "Two realities becoming one. The crucible doesn't destroy, it transforms. Nexus Primus will become the anchor point for a new kind of existence, neither fully Volteri nor fully human." On the command channel, Harper could hear panicked reports from the engineering section. Commander Rice's voice cut through the chaos. "Admiral, the station is emitting some kind of energy field. It's expanding outward. The Volteri are fleeing, but we can't outrun it." "Orders, sir." Harper stared at the precursor, anchor building inside him. "This wasn't our choice. You had no right to force this upon us." "Choice is an illusion, Admiral," the precursor replied. "The strong survive. The adaptable evolve. The Volteri chose conquest. What will humans choose?" The energy field from the doorway was expanding, filling the cargo bay with shimmering light. Harper could feel it washing over him, through him, changing something fundamental in his very cells. "Admiral." Rice's voice was desperate now. "The field has engulfed us. Systems are changing, reconfiguring. The crew, something's happening to the crew." Harper tried to respond, but his voice caught in his throat. His vision blurred, then sharpened to a clarity he had never experienced before. He could see energy patterns, quantum probabilities, the underlying fabric of reality itself. "Have you done to me?" he finally managed to say. "Given you the potential your species always had," the precursor answered. "The question is, what will you do with it?" Beyond the viewport, Harper could see the transformation spreading. Nexus Primus was no longer recognizable as a Volteri station. It had become something new, a vast, crystalline structure that pulsed with the same energy that now flowed through Harper himself. "Commander Rice, Lieutenant Chen," Harper called over the comm. "Status report." When Rice's face appeared on the view screen, Harper nearly didn't recognize him. The commander's features were subtly altered, his eyes now containing the same cosmic depth as the precursors. "We're changing, Admiral," Rice reported, his voice calm despite the transformation. "The crew, the ship, everything. I can't explain it, But I can feel more. It's like I can see connections I never could before. The crucible was never meant to be a weapon. The precursor explained. It is a catalyst for the next stage of evolution. The Volturi failed their test by using it to conquer. Now humanity stands at the same crossroads. Harper looked down at his hands, watching as energy coursed just beneath his skin. And if we refuse this evolution, you cannot. It has begun. The precursor moved to the doorway again. What remains to be seen is whether humans will use this ascension as the Volturi did, to dominate, or whether you will choose a different path. As the precursor began to step back through the portal, Harper lunged forward, grabbing its arm. You don't get to play God with our species and then just leave. The beam turned to him, and for the first time, Harper saw something like emotion in its cosmic eyes. We are not gods, Admiral Harper. We are simply further along the path that you now begin. And we are not leaving. It gestured to the transform station. We are joining. The real test begins now. With that, the precursor dissolved into pure energy, flowing into Harper himself. His mind exploded with knowledge. Histories of countless civilizations, the true nature of the cosmos, the purpose of the endless cycle of evolution that drove all sentient life. And something else, the location of surviving human colonies, hidden from both Earth and the Volturi, waiting in the darkness between stars. Admiral. Chen's voice reached him through the chaos in his mind. The Volturi fleet. They're coming back. Hundreds of ships. And they're transmitting a message. They want to speak with you. Harper stared out at the transformed station, at the Volturi fleet surrounding it, and at his own reflection in the viewport. His eyes now filled with stars. The precursor had called this a test, but Harper recognized it for what it truly was. A war for the future of both species, and humanity had just acquired the ultimate weapon. Put them through, he said. It's time to show the Volturi what humans are really capable of. The face of High Commander Vexera appeared on the view screen, his 4 eyes narrowing at the sight of Harper's transformation. The Volturi leader's scales had taken on a metallic sheen, suggesting he too had been changed by the energy field emanating from the station. What have you done, human? Vexera demanded, his translator unable to fully mask the fear in his voice. Harper studied the alien commander, seeing him with new clarity. With his enhanced perception, Harper could detect subtle energy patterns flowing through the Volturi, similar to what now coursed through his own veins, but different. Where Harper's energy seemed to pulse with creativity and adaptability, Vexera's radiated rigid control and dominance. I didn't do anything, Commander, Harper replied calmly. This was set in motion long before either of our species reached the stars. The question is, what do we do now? Vexera's outer eyes blinked rapidly. The precursors have returned. The prophecies spoke of this day, when they would judge whether we had used their gifts wisely. His voice hardened. We conquered half the galaxy with their technology. We proved ourselves worthy. Is that what you think this is about? Conquest. Harper shook his head. You misunderstood their test. The precursors didn't want warriors. They wanted creators. Lieutenant Chen's voice came through on a private channel. Admiral, I'm detecting massive energy fluctuations throughout the transformed station. It's reconfiguring itself again. Harper nodded, unsurprised. Through his new consciousness, he could feel the station responding to the collective thoughts and emotions of both species, human and Volturi alike. It was becoming a reflection of their inner conflict. Your fleet destroyed Earth, Harper said to Vexera, struggling to contain the anger that still burned within him despite his transformation. Billions dead because you misinterpreted the precursor's intention. We did what was necessary, Vexera insisted. Your species was developing too quickly, without the wisdom to use such power responsibly. We had already embraced the precursor's gifts for centuries. It was our right to determine who else might join the Ascended. As they spoke, Harper became aware of something else. Threads of communication flowing between the surviving crew of the Vindicator, a telepathic network forming spontaneously among the transformed humans. Through this connection, he could sense their collective rage, their desire for retribution. Commander Rice's thoughts reached him clearly. "We have the power now, Admiral. We could destroy them all with a thought." And he was right. Harper could feel the potential surging through him, the ability to direct the energy of the transformed station as a weapon that could obliterate the entire Volteri fleet. One command, one concentrated burst of will, and humanity would have its revenge. But alongside this temptation came understanding, memories from the precursor that had merged with him, showing civilizations that had faced this same choice throughout the galaxy's long history. Those who chose vengeance inevitably destroyed themselves in the process. "No," Harper whispered, both to Vexera and to his crew. "This ends now." With deliberate focus, Harper reached out through his new consciousness, connecting not just with his crew, but with the transformed Volteri on their ships and the station. He opened his mind, sharing everything: Earth's final moments, the suffering of his people, the desperate journey of the Vindicator, and finally, the truth he had learned from the precursors. Vexera recoiled physically on the screen, overwhelmed by the flood of human emotion and memory. "Stop this," he commanded, but his authority meant nothing in this new reality. "You need to understand what you've done," Harper insisted, maintaining the connection. "And we need to understand why." In return, Harper felt Volteri memories pouring into him. Their first contact with precursor technology 5 centuries earlier, their rapid advancement, and then the discovery that they were not alone in being chosen. The fear that had driven them to eliminate potential rivals before they too could ascend. The guilt some had carried for the genocide they'd committed in the name of survival. On the transformed station, structures were shifting rapidly, responding to this exchange, half becoming crystalline spires that reached toward the stars, half forming defensive arrays aimed at the surrounding space. The station itself had become a battleground between two evolutionary paths. "We stand at a crossroads," Harper said, addressing both his crew and the Volteri. The precursors didn't create this test to see which species would dominate. They wanted to know which path we would choose when given true power, creation or destruction. Through the telepathic network, Harper could feel opinions dividing among both humans and Volteri. Many of his crew still burned for revenge. Many Volteri still believed in their inherent superiority. But others from both species were beginning to see beyond their ancient conflict. The station trembled as energy surged through its crystalline structure. Warning alerts flashed across Harper's console. The power building within the transformed Nexus Primus was reaching critical levels. Soon it would either stabilize into its new form or tear itself apart, taking both fleets with it. "We need to make a choice," Harper announced. "All of us together." He reached deeper into his new consciousness, finding the connections that linked him to the station itself. With careful precision, he began to redirect the chaotic energies, not toward weapons or defenses, but toward something else entirely: a bridge. On the main view screen, a new image appeared: a small blue planet, third from its sun, partially obscured by swirling white clouds. Earth, not destroyed, but transformed, just as they had been. The continents were recognizable, but they glowed with the same crystalline energy that now flowed through the station and the people aboard it. "Impossible," breathed Vexera. "We witnessed your planet's destruction." "You witnessed its transformation," Harper corrected him, understanding flowing through him. "The Crucible technology doesn't destroy, it shifts and evolves. When your fleet bombarded Earth, you unknowingly triggered the dormant precursor technology buried beneath our planet's surface." Hope surged through the human crew as the truth became clear. Earth hadn't been destroyed. It had been elevated to a higher state of existence, one that the unascended could not perceive. "Our home still exists," Harper continued, "but in a form beyond what we were capable of experiencing before our own transformation. And now we have a choice. Continue our war in this new state of being, or embrace what the precursors intended: coexistence and creation. The telepathic network hummed with conflicting emotions: vengeance, hope, fear, wonder. But gradually, a consensus began to form among both humans and Valtteri. The station responded, its structure finally stabilizing into a massive crystalline tree, branches reaching into space, roots extending toward the transformed Earth. High Commander Vexra was silent for a long moment. Then, with visible effort, he removed his ceremonial armor, the symbol of his military authority, and set it aside. 5 centuries of conquest, he said quietly. 5 centuries of misunderstanding our purpose. He looked up at Harper. We have much to atone for, Admiral. Harper nodded. And we have much to rebuild. But not alone. As he spoke, something unexpected happened. The bridge between the station and Earth began to pulse with new energy signatures. Thousands of them, millions, streaming toward the station. Through his enhanced perception, Harper recognized them as human consciousness, the billions who had been on Earth during its transformation. They weren't dead. They had been waiting, evolved but dormant, for the rest of humanity to join them. Admiral, Lieutenant Chen's voice was thick with emotion. I'm detecting. It's Earth's fleet. Ships we thought destroyed in the initial assault. They're appearing around the transformed Earth. The final piece fell into place in Harper's mind. This had never been a test of one species against another. It had been a test of whether they could overcome their most basic instincts: fear, hatred, vengeance, when faced with the ultimate power. As the human and Valtteri fleets consolidated around the transformed station, a new presence made itself known through the telepathic network, the collective consciousness of the precursors observing from beyond the veil of ordinary reality. The cycle continues. They communicated. 2 paths have converged. The real journey begins. Harper turned to the viewport, watching as the transformed station, now a nexus point between multiple states of existence, began to generate a field that expanded outward, offering the same evolution to all it touched, not forced upon them as it had been on Harper and his crew, but as a choice. The war between humans and the Valtteri Dominion was over. A different kind of struggle was just beginning. The challenge of wielding cosmic power with wisdom and restraint. Set course for Earth, Harper ordered, knowing it would be both a homecoming and a first contact with something new. It's time we properly introduced ourselves to the galaxy. As the Vindicator's transformed engines powered up, Harper felt one last communication from the precursor consciousness that had merged with him, not words, but understanding. The test wasn't over. It had only just begun. And this time, the examiners would be watching very carefully indeed. The journey back to Earth took mere moments with the transformed Vindicator. Space itself seemed to bend around the ship, responding to Harper's thoughts as much as to any navigation commands. The human and Valtteri vessels traveled together, no longer as enemies, but as uncertain allies bound by their shared evolution. As they approached the transformed Earth, Harper stood at the viewport, scarcely breathing. The planet gleamed like a sapphire set in crystal, familiar continents and oceans now interwoven with luminous structures that reached into the upper atmosphere. It was Earth, but an Earth reborn. It's beautiful, Lieutenant Chen whispered beside him. Like the rest of the crew, she had adapted to her transformation with remarkable resilience. Her eyes, now containing pinpoints of starlight, reflected the planet below. It's home, Harper replied simply. After everything, the despair, the rage, the thirst for vengeance, he had never expected to say those words again. Commander Reyes joined them, his posture still military precise despite the cosmic energy flowing beneath his skin. Sensors are detecting billions of consciousness signatures on the surface and in orbit. Our people, Admiral. They're waiting for us. Harper nodded, feeling the truth of it through the telepathic network that now connected all transformed beings. Earth's population hadn't died in the Valtteri attack. They had transcended, their consciousness preserved and elevated even as their planet was transformed around them. "Admiral," Chen said hesitantly, "what do we say to them? How do we explain what's happened to us?" Harper considered this as the Vindicator entered Earth's orbit. Below, he could see the crystalline spires of what had once been major cities: New York, London, Beijing, Cairo, now transformed into nexus points of energy and consciousness. "We tell them the truth," he finally answered. "That humanity has been given an opportunity to become something greater than we ever imagined, and that we're not alone in this journey." A communication request chimed on the bridge. Not a traditional transmission, but a directed telepathic link from the planet's surface. Harper accepted it, and a familiar face appeared on the view screen. "Diana," Harper breathed, recognizing Admiral Voss. Like them, she had been transformed, her appearance subtly altered by the cosmic energy that now flowed through her. "You survived." Voss smiled. "As did you, James, though survived may not be the right word for what's happened to any of us." Her expression grew serious. "I see you brought company." Harper glanced at the Volteri ships flanking the Vindicator. Former enemies. Now, complicated allies. The precursors had plans for both our species. "So we've learned," Voss nodded. "The transformation has given us access to knowledge we never dreamed possible. The universe is so much more than we understood." She hesitated. "Are you ready to come home?" The question hung in the air. Despite their transformation, despite knowing Earth still existed, Harper felt a moment of uncertainty. They had changed. Earth had changed. Could it still truly be home? "We're ready," he decided. The landing was unlike anything Harper had experienced before. The Vindicator descended toward what had once been the Pacific Command headquarters in San Francisco, now a sprawling crystalline complex that seemed to grow directly from the bay. But rather than using thrusters or anti-gravity, the ship simply phased through layers of atmosphere, guided by the collective will of those waiting below. As Harper led his crew down the Vindicator's ramp, he was met by a delegation unlike any diplomatic reception in human history. Thousands of transformed humans stood in concentric circles around the landing area, their minds linked in a welcome that transcended words. Among them walked former world leaders, scientists, ordinary citizens, all part of the new collective consciousness while somehow maintaining their individuality. Admiral Voss stepped forward to greet them formally. Behind her stood a diverse council that appeared to represent Earth's new leadership. "Welcome home, crew of the Vindicator," Voss announced, her voice carrying both sound and deeper meaning. "And welcome to our Volteri guests." High Commander Vexera, who had accompanied Harper from his own vessel, stepped forward cautiously. This was the moment Harper had been concerned about, the first direct contact between Earth's transformed population and representatives of the species that had attacked them. But instead of hostility, Harper felt something unexpected ripple through the telepathic network: curiosity, caution, and a willingness to understand. An elderly human counselor addressed Vexera directly. "For centuries, your people watched ours from the shadows, fearing what we might become. Today, we stand as equals in transformation. The past cannot be undone, but the future remains unwritten." Vexera bowed his head. "The Dominion acted from fear, not wisdom. We misinterpreted our own ascension as superiority rather than responsibility." He straightened, his 4 eyes scanning the assembled humans. "I offer no excuses for what we did, only the promise that we will work to atone for our actions." The next days passed in a blur of discovery as Harper and his crew reintegrated with Earth's transformed society. They learned that the planet's transformation had occurred in an instant when the Volteri bombardment had activated dormant precursor technology buried deep within the Earth's crust. Technology that had been there since before humans had evolved, waiting for the moment when they would need it most. "They've been guiding our evolution from the beginning," explained Dr. Eleanor Reed, formerly Earth's leading xenobiologist, now one of the primary researchers studying their new condition. Both humans and Volteri were species of interest to the precursors, experiments in different evolutionary approaches. Guinea pigs, Harper said with a hint of bitterness. Reed shook her head. More like students. The precursors don't direct our choices. They merely provide opportunities for advancement and observe how we use them. The most remarkable discovery came a week after their return, when the transformed humans and Valtteri together managed to access deeper layers of the precursor knowledge embedded in their new consciousness. What they found changed everything they thought they knew about their place in the universe. There are others. Lieutenant Chen reported during a council meeting that included both human and Valtteri representatives. Dozens of transformed species throughout the galaxy, each having passed through their own version of the trial we faced. A community of ascended beings, Commander Rice added, all watching, all waiting to see if we're ready to join them. The implications were staggering. Humanity had gone from believing itself alone in the universe to discovering the Valtteri, to now learning they were merely the latest in a long line of species to achieve this transformation. But with this knowledge came a sobering revelation. Not all species had used their ascension wisely. Some had turned their new powers toward domination, creating rifts in the fabric of reality itself. These fallen, as the precursor memories named them, posed a threat to all ascended and non-ascended beings alike. So the test continues, Harper observed during a private conversation with Voss and Vexera as they stood on a balcony overlooking the transformed San Francisco Bay. First, we had to choose whether to use our power for vengeance or reconciliation. Now we have to decide how we'll use it in this larger community. And whether we'll stand against the fallen when the time comes, Vexera added. Voss gazed up at the night sky, where new constellations now shimmered, markers of other transformed worlds visible only to their evolved perception. We'll need to work together. Not just humans and Valtteri, but all ascended species who choose creation over destruction. 3 months after the Vindicator's return, Earth had established communication with 7 other ascended civilizations. The knowledge exchange transformed their understanding of the cosmos almost daily. Together with their former enemies, humans began the process of helping other Valtteri worlds through the ascension process, this time with guidance rather than fear. Harper found himself appointed as Earth's primary envoy to these other ascended species. It was a role he'd never imagined for himself, but one that felt right. He had made the journey from soldier to diplomat, from vengeance to understanding. On the eve of his departure to visit the first of these civilizations, a water-dwelling species from a distant arm of the galaxy, Harper took a moment alone on the observation deck of the newly constructed Nexus Earth, the orbital station that served as humanity's gateway to the stars. Below him, the transformed Earth pulsed with life and possibility. Above, the infinite cosmos beckoned. The war that had nearly extinguished humanity had instead elevated it to a new plane of existence. Quite a view, isn't it? Came a voice from behind him. Harper turned to find Chen and Rice joining him by the viewport, along with Dr. Patel, who had become one of the leading experts on integrating conventional technology with their new evolved capabilities. I was just thinking about how differently things could have turned out, Harper admitted. If we'd managed to deploy the Crucible as a weapon rather than as it was intended, we have destroyed ourselves along with the Valtteri. Patel finished for him. The energy release would have consumed both fleets and likely created a tear in spacetime that could have threatened the entire sector. Rice shook his head. Hard to believe we once thought of the Crucible as our last hope for revenge. And now it's our gateway to the future, Chen added. Harper smiled, feeling the weight of his former hatred finally lifting completely. The transformed HSS Vindicator, now serving as his personal vessel for diplomatic missions, waited in the docking bay. Tomorrow would bring new discoveries, new challenges, new understanding. The journey's just beginning, he said, turning from Earth to face the stars. The cosmos stretched before them, vast and mysterious, and for the first time, welcoming. Beyond the physical universe, beyond even the perception of the newly ascended humans and Valtteri, the precursors observed with satisfaction. Another test concluded, another cycle complete. The students were becoming teachers in their own right, and in the darkness between galaxies, the fallen watched as well, their ancient hunger stirring at the emergence of new power in the cosmos. The true test still awaited, when creation would stand against destruction for the fate of all existence. But that was a story for another day. For now, humanity had found its place among the stars, not as conquerors, not as victims, but as creators of their own destiny. The human warship that had set out for vengeance had instead discovered something far more valuable: a future without end. Harper took one last look at the transformed Earth, a monument to humanity's resilience and potential, before turning toward his waiting ship and the infinite possibilities that lay beyond.